3, 2, and 1.
Dentist and their physician's assistant, whatever they call them, their little henchwoman there. They come in with this tray of tools like I'm in a muffler shop. She's working in my mouth, poking and scraping and jabbing and sticking all these things in there. And then when she's done, she said, I noticed a little bleeding in your gums. Have you noticed any bleeding recently? I said, how recently do you mean? Because everything was fine when I came in. Before you started stabbing me in the face. That little ice pick.
Hey, Joe DeVito, everybody. Welcome Joe DeVito to the big program.
Hey, how are you?
Very funny, Joe. Good stuff.
Thank
I
you.
like it. You know, it's funny. I was watching that clip earlier today, and you know, I'm watching you with my comic goggles on, and I'm going, all right, he's going to say chewing on cutlery because it's got the CKT. It's got the hard CKPT sound in it. Joe DeVito, welcome to the show, everybody. That's the Joe DeVito joins us from on The Great Awakening from Fox and Friends. You may know him, Gutfeld, but prior to that, stand-up. How long have you been doing stand-up now, Joe?
This month is going to be my 24th year.
Yay!
Pretty crazy, huh?
Dude, 45 for me.
It's nuts, isn't it?
It's so crazy. It goes by so fast. This weekend, Joe is going to be at Max's out in
Max's Esca in Staten Island.
On Staten, Italy, as we like to call it, or
at Richmond Avenue.
Yeah, or Staten Ireland is another way. You're familiar with Irish dementia?
What is Irish dementia?
You forget everything but the resentments.
that works.
Joe's show is going to be cheaper than the toll to get over there, so I would take advantage of it.
Just the Verrazano. It's like just to be safe on the Bell Parkway, I'm going to leave 2 days in advance.
Dude, they've been doing construction on Bell Parkway ever since I was a kid, and one of the bits that I always throw in when I'm doing stand-up out on, especially out on Long Island, I go, you know, every time you get on Bell Parkway, it says. There's signs that say men working, men working. Where? Yeah. Where are they? I see the signs, but I see a guy leaning on a shovel. I see an ugly woman with a flag. I don't see any guys working out there.
Yeah. I like the sign that says no photography while on the Verrazano Bridge. Oh, I was just getting ready to pull over and set up my tripod. Thanks for letting me know.
I want to get a selfie as I'm jumping off.
I know, with the Fresh Kills landfill in the background.
So Joe is working. What are the shows this weekend, Joe?
This weekend I'm doing the Max's
7:30. I mean the time 7:30. What is it? 7:30.
Showtime 9 o'clock show, but get there early because the food's really good.
Hey, of course it's on Staten Island. Of course, your food's going to be really good.
Yep.
So you know it's funny. I was just do you know Phil, by the way, my partner?
I think our paths have crossed here and there, but I don't know if we've ever done
early on back in the early Sirius satellite radio raw dog days.
Oh, geez,
long time ago.
Okay. Analog radio, right?
Yes,
dude. It was not. How much fun was it? Though,
digital, actually, back then. Yeah,
that's when radio was fun. That's when radio had content.
Yeah.
We were just listening to some old clips of Opie and Anthony and Howard, and dude, there's nothing like that on the radio right now. I don't want to say any more because you know things do change and come back around. But the heyday of Howard, Opie and Anthony, and even when I was doing it with Wolf up in Albany, oh my God, it was like the Wild West.
Yeah, and you'd never heard anything like it. I remember. Well, I used to do. Anthony's back on WABC.
Right, on Sunday nights, correct?
Yeah, it's really good stuff.
I heard. Yeah, I've been. Yeah, he's good. He's good on his own. He was great with Opie, but he's also very strong on his own. Yeah, he's very good. Yeah. Now you've been doing stand up. Well, you said 25 years, right?
Yeah, 24. Yeah,
24. And so now you're involved with Fox and Friends, and you're on Gutfeld pretty regularly.
Gutfeld, yeah, Gutfeld. I write for Greg's show, and I'm on the panel usually about twice a month, and it's
nice.
It's been amazing. You know
Well, you've been amazing. You've been amazing on that show.
Thanks.
I mean, you talk about timing.
Don't interrupt him, John. Let him continue.
John, it's got to be tough. Like knowing how far back he goes in New York comedy, working the clubs in New York, Jersey, that area, and being on Fox these days with people the way they have this TDS now, even to be associated with Fox. I mean, you got to give him credit for what he's doing, because honestly, Joe, it takes balls to do what you're doing, even to just be associated with Fox and comedy at the same time.
Well, it was a risk, and Joe Mackey is also a writer for the show, and he's a very funny comic. And we talked about this at the beginning. We thought, well, what are we getting ourselves into? Because we know that we lost work because people saw Fox, and unfortunately, there are people who decided, even after years, that they didn't want to be friends anymore, which I thought was. I'm not saying anything differently than I said in the years before, but the good news is that the audience it's opened me up to has been great. I mean, I've got a following now of, the whole thing is you want to get people who like what you do.
Yes.
And I think it's also helped me as a comic a lot too, because the whole thing with stand-up is you want to be honest. You want to talk about how you really feel about things. And when I'm on panels, like I'm not going to go there and just tell goofy jokes. I have to really think, well, what do I think about this issue? And it's helped me become a better comic, because there was no need to pander to anybody, because nobody was going to buy it anyway. So I had no choice but to grow into who I was supposed to be.
I told Phil this recently, and it's an analogy that most comics appreciate. In the last 5 to 10 years, started about 10, maybe 12 years ago, suddenly they gave the mic to the hecklers, and then gave them cred to go with it. It's like suddenly, they used to throw the hecklers out of the show. Now they stop and go, "What's wrong? What do you mean, what's wrong? Get out. You don't like it. Get out."
Yeah. Oh, I feel like the clubs should have trap doors or something, that once those people start, you just crank it, or give us tasers on stage.
Have you ever done the Laugh Factory in Vegas?
No, I haven't done that room.
So the guy who works it there is old school comedy club manager, and he was one of these Vegas door guys that's been there forever, but he gets comedy, and he works with, of course, Harry Basil, who's the owner. He has the stage set up like a booby trap. And the first time it went off, it's great. If anyone who's not a comic jumps on the stage to take a selfie or do some goofy mugshot with the microphone, he's got these light bars from like ambulances and police cars that I didn't see. They're set up behind the curtains, and a siren, like an air raid siren. And if you touch that stage and you're not a comic, and I jumped on it. I went, George, what was that? He goes, "That guy doesn't belong up on that stage." He goes, "That's sacred ground, man." He goes, "You know what it takes to get up on that stage? That's your office. You don't go up there." And I went, yeah.
George and Jamie Masada are brothers, apparently.
Yeah, buddy. You can't go up there, buddy, man. You're not allowed, baby. Have you ever dealt with Jamie from the Laugh Factory?
No, the one time I worked, there was briefly a Laugh Factory in Manhattan.
Yes, that's correct. It used to be at that porn palace.
Show World. It was the old Show World, and it was the
old porn palace.
Oh, it was the old like multi-level porn Taj Mahal. And I remember even coming in there to do spots, I was like, oh, I don't want to touch anything. And of course, I still was, thinking, do they accept the tokens that I still have from Show World?
Of course they do. Listen,
it was funny, Joe, because right after Jamie opened that place on 42nd Street, I remember we went over there because Jamie was doing the same thing on Thanksgiving, feeding all the homeless people, and to just serve food in that old porn theater. I was just,
wow. Yeah, it's like the buffet at the strip club. Yeah, try the potatoes.
You could, every time I was there, it was like you could hear ghosts silently masturbating in the background.
It was a very creepy vibe, and he tried very hard to turn it around, but it wasn't happening. But he had that very thick Middle Eastern accent, and the funny thing about Jamie was, whenever you dealt with him, especially throughout the late 80s, early 90s, where it seemed like we were engaged in some conflict in the Middle East, whatever country we were at war with, you could be sure that was the country Jamie was not from. He would go, "Hey, buddy, you know, I'm not Afghani, right, man? I'm not that guy. Hey, buddy, I'm not Iranian, right? And I'm not Iraqi, right? Yeah, right. You're Sicilian. Okay, dude, move on."
Yeah, he's Dutch.
You mentioned your fans earlier now and getting you and that Fox audience. Like, explain to us because comedy usually, I've heard from John throughout the last 40 years of how thankless the job can be doing the cruises and whatnot. But doing these shows now after doing Gutfeld and the love, because The one thing I got to say about this side, when you talk about stuff, you can't talk about the other side, but when you talk to the people on this side, there's a lot more love. And it just, do you notice that at your shows, like how gracious the people are and how friendly the audiences are?
Yeah, I think it's a couple things. I think it's that because the media and particularly entertainment skews liberal, that one of the reasons the show's been such a huge hit is that there was a half of the country that was not watching any late night shows. There was nothing for them. They would turn off the TV or they would watch whatever other channel. And to finally say, hey, here's a show where that not only understands where we're coming from, but that doesn't insult us. Those other shows actively insult half the
and
country.
attack. Forget insulting. Attack
them. Yeah, it's vicious. So we had that working for us. And but an interesting thing I found that a left-leaning comic draws a left-leaning audience who wants to hear left-leaning jokes. Someone like me draws a conservative audience who just wants to hear jokes.
They just want to be funny. Right.
They just wanted to be funny. So people who may know me from Gutfeld or some shows, when I run my mouth about politics, I can go up on stage and never talk about politics, and they will be absolutely thrilled. Because that was another part about being in the clubs that, especially as I got older, I realized, man, I don't want to hear some 24-year-old lecturing me on how it is, because I once was 24 years old and I know you don't know what you're talking about yet. You just haven't been around long enough. So yeah, it's and when you mentioned the love, the way that people are so excited to come up after a show, it's I found it profoundly affecting. Like it's very different than, we always as comics talk about the shows where you're treated like crap, but the shows where people want to come up and say, I appreciate you. It's like, whoa, this is really cool.
I have a friend, he's a comic mutual. I don't want to give him away on the air, but he came up to me recently and he's very left-leaning. And he said to me, I got to tell you something, Johnny. He said, I know we don't see things aligned politically, but I will say this. The people on your side of the aisle are a lot more civil than the people on my side of the aisle. And I said, thank you. He also added this PS. He said they've gone too far. And I've had a lot of my friends who were left-leaning comedians say, and you've heard this, the Dems, I didn't leave the Dems, they left me.
Yeah.
Yeah, and conversely, I say, I'm not a Trump guy, he's a me guy. He reflects my values. I don't support him as much. He supports my perspective of the world. Yeah, I don't want men in women's sports. I don't want trannies teaching kids, even though I don't have kids, there's two genders. Don't get into me with the pronouns and all that other nonsense. And like yourself, I have lost work and suffered the consequences for standing there. And I don't have a problem with it. Yeah, all right, I took a hit financially, but I'm much more content with where I am and what I'm doing, because these other comics, in my opinions, are sellouts. Kimmel, Colbert. Even I will give Mars some credit, but did you see Mehmet bitch slap him over the weekend?
No, I didn't see that.
Oh my God, he was on Club
Random.
Club Random, and he had David Mehmet on. And interesting, Mehmet is conservative, right leaning, even though he wrote like Wag the Dog and a lot of other things. A lot of politically infused material, and he said. Bill Maher started talking to him about how he should have done this and he should have done that, and I see it this way and I see it that way. And Mehmet looked right at him and he goes, "You're full of shit." And he was like, "What?" Yeah. And he hit Bill over the head with some facts and stuff. And he was like, "Well, I don't think that's." And he was like, "Yeah, get out of here." It was great to see. It was great to see someone at that level of the business who sees what we see and has a perspective like we have. I've never seen it in my life this contrasted. Would you agree?
Well, they always said the polarization.
The polarization.
And to look at it through stand-up. When I started, and even up until maybe 10 years ago, there was something called current events. Yeah, it wasn't politics. You just talked about, the classic Jay Leno. Do you hear about this? Do you hear about this guy?
Yeah, something funny. I don't know if you know about
these guys.
So this is kind of crazy.
You could talk about these things and put your point of view on it, but people didn't need to know your political point of view.
Right.
And when I first started to go to shows, when I got into stand-up, and I would look at the lineups, And it would be people telling jokes and talking about their lives. And out of a 10 comic lineup, there would be the politics guy. And he was usually the guy who came out in a blazer, and he was sort of a Dennis Miller-ish. And
One guy.
And he was usually the least funny person on
Got the fewest laughs.
Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah.
Yes.
And that's what it was. But now it's, I guess I get bothered more as a comic when I hear someone go up and they say, it's like, don't tell me the most obvious take on something. And I guess because they're so used to speaking with each other, it's a natural human thing that you're not able to conceive that there's someone who might not agree with you. And I think a big problem with the left is they're so invested in they are correct and they cannot tolerate even hearing another opinion. That's why, I hesitate to say on the right, but where I found a home, we're just so used to getting insulted and talked down to that we don't really get that upset about it. We're used to being called, being called Nazis and idiots. And I mean, the whole thing about, I joke about people say white supremacy. My last name's DeVito. I say Italians, we've only been white people since Godfather 3. Before that, we were greasy, guinea, olive oil, like that's who we were. So
and your olive oil and your greasy charm.
Yeah.
Joe, you mentioned as a comic now. For me, I got to ask both of you guys this because as comics, President Trump's timing, you just look at him, how great of a stand-up comic would this guy be? Because his timing, his command of the audience, I mean, how good would he be?
You can't follow him.
Yeah, it's the, you talk about truth and honesty in comedy. Whatever you think about him, he is 100% who he is. There's zero filter, and I've seen it actually crack up people who are on the other side.
Exactly.
During COVID, some friends of mine, young women it was a young black woman. You wouldn't think she was a Trump supporter. And it was a press conference during COVID where Dr. Bricks even said something like, "Oh, I even had the sniffles this morning." And Trump just went like, "Hello," like he did like a, and this woman posted it, and she and her friends were like, "I can't even with this guy." And they were laughing because that is such a hysterically funny, like that's not, you can't think, should I do my Jerry Lewis-esque Heisman?
No, he's
like,
it's
just who he is. So yeah, his timing is great. Even
and
when
he clips in just the right proportion, I think. He doesn't go overboard. He'll drop a great line every once in a while, but he doesn't lean into it too much. When it happens, at least I know, I go, "Well, I didn't see that coming." And then you might not see one for another 1 or 2 or 3 interviews. And he's not trying to be funny.
Right.
Yeah.
But that's the thing that's so endearing about him. And I just wish the other side, and I hate calling him the other side, because if we would just all be normal for just a day.
And we all just get along.
No, but think about it, John. If we'd all just be normal for a day and just appreciate this guy, because we've got to appreciate the funny. I mean, just for funny's sake, some of the stuff, Joe, I mean, it's so hilarious that he does. What he did to Zelensky in that Oval Office was it was hilarious.
Yeah,
he's very great.
When he did, was it the Al Smith dinner where he went up and was actually doing those jokes?
God, and it aged very well. It aged very well. And
but he was doing this. He was doing this thing that cracks me up, that he would say the joke, he would deliver the punchline that ripped on somebody, but then he can't help himself to just tag it with "terrible person."
And how he looked at Cardinal Dolan too for approval. It was great.
So I don't know. Maybe we're all going to hell in a handbasket, but at least that made.
But we'll be laughing on the way, which is half the battle. So.
For me, he has been refreshing to watch because he is so different from anything that's come along. And to your point earlier, I've never been a political guy either. The guy back in the day when we were starting out was a guy by the name of Jimmy Tingle. Jimmy Tingle was a comic from Boston, and the Boston circuit, pound for pound, was as good, if not funnier, than any circuit anywhere. Lenny Clark, Steve Sweeney, all of these guys, DePaulo, I mean, monsters. Stephen Wright. So Tingle was he was the one political guy in the whole scheme of things. So he'd go up and get polite laughter and some response. But then who's crushing it? Gallagher hitting a watermelon with a mallet.
Yeah.
I mean, that was the sensibility back then. It was like, okay, that's nice, political, ha ha ha. And then he'd come up and hit fruit with his hammer, and everyone would be falling down laughing. Now, I did a gig last week with Colin Quinn at some place in New York, and I hadn't been on stage in a few months, so I was feeling feeling it out a little bit. And I go up on stage, and I'm throwing out stuff that I know is funny, and I'm getting half of the crowd doing this, and the other half going, not appropriate. You know, the fuck out of here. Go away. Go away.
Yeah. That was the Ding Ho up there, right? That they
that restaurant.
Ding Ho in Boston. What a great! I did it once. What a great! That was the place. It was a Chinese restaurant up near Boston. Everyone worked it. The Ding Ho.
Joe, I got to ask you, what's the best dive comedy club you've played across the country? Because John's is the Carnival Cruise Line. So.
No, it's Mac. It's Max this weekend, Friday. 2 shows on Staten Island.
Well, it's a strange thing because I've been in rooms that were well run, that were clean, that were classy, whatever you want to say, and they didn't have a funny vibe.
Didn't care.
But I'd have to say a room that I always enjoyed was the Wisecrackers in Allentown, Pennsylvania. And it just was a square room where they used to do the breakfast. I mean, we always used to joke you'd be on the stage and directly in front of you was the waffle maker. They didn't even put the waffle maker away.
That's awesome.
And the stage was really like, it wasn't even a pallet. It just was like a lip that came up off the floor. And it just was a square room with people from out. And it was always a good time. And I don't know what it was. Because certainly I did that room probably a dozen years. It's in the hotel. And every time I would check in, because you'd come in the night before to do radio the Friday morning. Every Thursday night when I came in, I'd say, hi, I'm the comedian for this weekend. And they would go, comedian? Comedy club? And I was like, the sign is right there for you. You've been doing this for 20. And they were like, comedy club? What are you talking about? So, yeah, that was a room with nothing special. That was always a lot of fun. But I try not to judge the room because there have been so many times where I've walked into a space and looked around and thought, who the hell thought this was a good place to do stand-up? And then it turns out to be, I'll put it to you this way. I always tell young comics, always do your best, even if it's 5 people in the crowd, because you owe it to them, but you owe it to yourself because it may be the most fun you ever have. There are shows I remember in drippy basements with 5 tourists in the audience in Manhattan, and I had a blast. So you can never judge it. You always got to go in there and do your best because it might be a night you remember for the rest of your career.
Yeah, like Dublin's in LA, John. I don't know if you were there when Dublin's Pub was like the place for comedy out there in LA. There were these little places. Yeah, I mean, Dane Cook started it at Dublin's. I mean, these little dive places sometimes have just a great following.
Some of my best sets were 3 o'clock in the morning at the Comic Strip in 1980. They were the best. You know, I waited all night long, saw the lineup of the greatest guys: Paul Reiser, Jerry Seinfeld, Jimmy Brogan, all of these monsters of comedy back then. And then here I am, 3 o'clock in the morning, 4 people left in the audience, and I couldn't get enough of it. Couldn't get enough. It was amazing.
Sometimes, you know, the famous quote is they asked Steve Martin why he quit doing stand-up, and he said Friday's second show. That's usually the one where the audience is beat up. They've worked all week. But I have to say, sometimes they can have this weird woozy vibe to them. And I've enjoyed them because I go up and I realize I'm not going to do whatever I did on the 8 o'clock show, because that's a bad feeling when you go up and you go into your usual planned out A material and the people are drooling and looking at you. But if you just go up and you see what happens, and maybe you do an old bit, maybe you try something new, maybe you play around, that's when it can get really fun. And that's where I enjoy the, I don't know, I guess the artistry of it, where you're playing it by ear and you've got your material, but you just see what happens, and it can be really, really fun.
Back in the day when I first started, they called working comics like myself, even though I did have, did get some stage time in the city, I wasn't one of the darlings. So they called us the Bridge and Tunnel guys.
Yeah.
And obviously we called them the city guys. But I loved Martling used to call the city comics the Saturday night first show guys, because anybody could kill on the Saturday night first show. And then he said, then come Friday or Saturday second show, that's when it forced you to be a great comic. Because like to your point, you had to go out, and here was an audience that was literally dozing off. And now you have to go out and convince them they're going to have a good time. And that, it's like a workout at a gym.
You have to impose your will.
Yes, you have to inject them. Yeah, you have to inject into them your vibe. Yeah, you do have to force it. I know. And then they wind up loving you for it. And then by the end, they're going, don't go. Okay.
Well, I think a lot of it is the audience has to know you're in charge. They have to be able to trust you. And I noticed that when I was doing the amateur shows, and they would have, the pros come in, the ringers to close the show or whatever. And you could just sense it on their walk to the microphone. Oh, this is different. This person has a different energy. They have a different, it's in their posture or, whatever you want to call it. But yeah, see, I actually started in New York City, but I've always lived here on since I've been doing stand-up, the 24 years I've lived on Long Island. So I had a foot in each world. And it was interesting to see, we used to call it premium blend syndrome, because Premium Blend was the Comedy Central showcase show.
Oh, right.
And the city comics would come out to Governors on a Thursday or Friday night, and they would have a clever 8 minutes, but they were like a sprinter. If you said do 10, it's like they got a cramp. They ran out of gas. And if you said do 15, they were deer in the headlights.
Or stretch.
They couldn't do it. But there were people I would see on Long Island who would murder in a firehouse and these other gigs. And you brought them into the city and told them to do 8 minutes, and they looked like clowns. So I remember watching that thinking, you got to cross train. You got to be able to do a little bit of both. You've just like you have to give a small crowd your 100% show, and you have to give a big crowd the sense of intimacy. You've got to be clever and creative, but you've got to deliver, because Governors is a good example. The Long Island clubs, comics come out from New York City on a 45-minute train or whatever it is, and now they have left Manhattan. They're in the rest of the world. Governors is like the rest of the world. And in New York City, there's a premium on if you tried but didn't quite get it, if you reached for something different. The rest of the world does not care. They paid for a babysitter. They had an overpriced dinner. Parking was a pain in the ass. However you do it, you make them laugh. You've got to deliver. So you learn, like, well, whatever it is I'm doing, it better be funny.
The great Joe DeVito. Check him out, joedevito.com. Tomorrow night, Staten Island. Or no, I'm sorry, Friday night, Staten Island. You have two shows, 6:30 if the people want some good food. They have dinner at that show. You also have an 8 p.m. show same night. For all your information, go to joedevito.com. You're all over the place. I think you do have two shows. Well, we'll ask your agent.
Oh, it's a good thing we hipped you to it. That's what I'm saying. What are shows like?
But you're the perfect example. Like, you can go up and do two shows, no problem. Another guy who, when you mentioned that, the comics comic, for me, always, whenever he would come to New York, Robert Schimmel was that guy. His cadence, he would walk on stage, and you'd see the other comics just kind of admire the cadence, the delivery. I mean, he'd always have a suit on. I mean, he was kind of a comics comic. He was one of those guys.
He had a swagger that fit him. It wasn't bombastic. It fit him. He was just was comfortable with what he was doing, and he was that guy. And he was very good. He was great at it, actually. Schimmel, brilliant.
Yeah, he had a vibe. Also, because he had a rough life, but he had a vibe where you weren't going to throw him. There was nothing an audience member could do.
Yes, correct. Yeah. He was grounded on stage. He was like, It was like, boom. It's like, this is, and it wasn't an arrogance. He just was very, very, very convicted in what he was doing. And to your point, right? You're not shaking him away from that position.
Yeah,
he was.
He had that honesty, and I laugh when you hear newer comics talk about, I do a lot of dark material. Okay, go listen to Schimmel from 20 years ago. He did dark material wearing a blazer. So I don't want to hear about you and your hoodie talking about.
Well, listen to Sam. Nobody
in your opinion, though, Joe, working today, who's one of those guys that you would pay to go and see, like, today?
Brian Regan.
Oh God, he is great. Hey.
Never have to work blue either, which is amazing.
No. See, I think he's almost like a fighter who doesn't have a weak discipline. the material's great, the delivery's amazing, the act outs, the energy, and he's squeaky clean. You can watch him with any age group.
Brilliant. So simple. Yeah. It's
And
so funny.
he makes me laugh at that level of, because as comics, we can be a bad audience, because I guess like we see a good comic and we don't laugh. We go, that's funny. It must be the way magicians watch each other. Like magicians are probably not like, I'm alive with wonder. We're like, oh, how did he do that? But Brian Regan will just, I turn off that part of my brain and I enjoy the ride. I like him a lot.
Right, you don't have to think with Regan. It's not thought intensive. That it's so simple. He does that thing about the lumber trucks. You ever see that?
Yeah.
He goes, yeah, I'm watching a truck filled with logs heading on the highway going in one direction. And then I see another one heading on the same highway going in the other direction. And I'm thinking, we could have fixed this with a phone call. It's just so
we got logs. Wow.
Yeah. But we got logs over here. Do you need logs? Yeah. I'll get you your logs. It's just, he's so funny. Yeah.
He's someone, the first time I saw him, it was years and years ago. And I had just gotten my own apartment with Comedy Central on cable. And I was watching one of his specials. And it was like a Saturday at 3 p.m. and I'm on the floor laughing. Very hard to do when you're just watching it on TV.
Yeah, very hard. And a friend of mine who used to direct television in the early days of my TV career used to tell me television does two things, and this is absolutely true. He says it cuts off all the highs and all the lows and gives you something in between. You were never as good as you thought, and you were never as bad as you thought. That being said, when you watch a guy like Brian Regan doing his thing, imagine how good that is in live. If you're watching it through that filter, that cutoff filter of television, the guys, you can't take anything. And you know what? He's an elitist in the sense that he never got the sitcom. He never got he does specials and stuff, but every year and a half, 2 years, he's got a whole new 30, 40 minutes of stuff. He's a guy just does not stop working. He's great.
And he's so incredibly hard on himself too, John.
Yeah.
It's amazing. I don't know how, Joe, if you've ever had the chance to work.
Now I don't have to beat him up.
No, but it's amazing. Like he really beats himself up if he misses one little tag or one little gesture. It's amazing, but he's a comics comic. He's just amazing.
Hey, he's no Joe DeVito. Come on now, Phil. He's going to be this Friday at Max on Staten Island. Get your tickets at joedevito.com.
2 shows.
For an undetermined number of shows, so we don't know. I'll tell you my one interaction with Brian Regan, and this was probably 22 years ago, because I was very new and I had just started getting spots at Governor's on Long Island. And I went to watch him on a Sunday. He was doing an early show, and place was packed, and I'm in back, and I had my watch on stopwatch, and I'm watching him get a major laugh every 8 to 10 seconds for an hour. And I'm talking about a laugh that any one of us would be like, thank you and good night. And he's just over and over and over. So the show ends and the bartender said, hey, DeVito, the brokerage just called. A bunch of their comics didn't show up. Why don't you come down? We recommended you. And I was, like I said, I was brand new. So I was like, yeah. So I go down to the brokerage. I meet the owner at the time. I do whatever my nonsense I was doing at the time. And when I come off stage, the owner said, nice job. You kept it clean. Brian Regan's here. Do you want to meet him? And I said, wow. Hell yeah. So I go over and he's hanging at the bar and I'm like, Brian, Joe DeVito, I'm so glad to meet you. I'm such a big fan. And the first thing he said was, hey, thanks a lot. And I'm hearing great things about you too. Now,
wow. Yeah.
It doesn't even matter if he was. When you're 2 years in and somebody says that, you're like, I can go on for another, I can be on stage eating it. And I'm going to think, well, Brian Regan said something nice about me, so I'm going to keep going. And he was wonderful.
In the early days of the comic strip, I remember the first time I saw Eddie Murphy, because I'd never met him. He was 17. They used to make him wait outside in the alley before he could come in, because he violated liquor laws. Yeah. But the comic strip had no such issues with that. They were the comic strip anyway. The comic strip had a divider that went down along the length of the room, and when it was only half full, they could pull that, and it really gave a sense of fullness and intimacy. So I forget who it was who was on stage introducing him, but they said, oh, we got a special treat for you, comedian Irish Eddie Murphy, blah, 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 Irish Eddie Murphy. And I'm sitting in the back, and I'd been doing stand-up maybe a year. And I'm thinking, ooh, an Irish comedian. I'm curious about this. He walks out from behind the curtain. He hasn't even gotten to the stage yet. He turns, he looks at the audience, and he goes, and he had them. And he had them. They roared, and he had them. And I went, oh, whoa, what's that? And then he went on stage and did all his classic bits. And I said, wow, that guy's amazing. About 3 months later, I walked in, and he was sitting in the back of the comic strip, that little step up tier. You know, there's little 2 steps in the back of that room. And I walked past, and he was sitting with 2 of his buds. And I just gave him the wave, and I heard him turn to his friend and say, that white boy there is funny. And man, my feet didn't touch the ground for 2 days. I was like, Eddie Murphy thinks I'm funny. It's amazing. It's an amazing. That's how you know you're part of the club. I was in the back of Rascals one night, and you know the rule at Rascals was if you're the headliner, the green room is yours. You put on whatever you want on the television, order whatever you want for food. Anyone you don't want in, get out. And I'm sitting back there, and I was never, prima donna in that regard. But somebody brought in a female quote unquote comedian who was running her mouth and saying all the wrong things. But I knew what she was doing. She was trying to get approval or attention.
Yeah,
whatever.
Trying to impress.
And I'm just sitting there, and I'm waiting a minute, and I said, who told you you're a comedian? And she goes, I couldn't help myself, dude. Mm-hmm. He goes, well, I worked Uncle Ho-Ho's Chuckle Hut in somewhere in East Nowhere, New York. And I said, and she started like stammering, like telling me all these things. And I went, no. I said, it's a rhetorical question. Here's what
like she was going to give you an actual name.
Right? Yeah, I went, Uncle Ho-Ho's Chuckle Hut. You didn't tell me that. What was Seinfeld line? Hey, it's every Tuesday night, Jerry's Lobster House, and hey, we got a comic here at 8:00. So I said, you're a comedian when other comedians refer to you as a comedian. And she went, oh. I said, I understand what you're doing, but relax. I said, just sit down and just take it easy. We're all. You're not impressing anybody here. We wound up becoming very good friends actually after that because she took it for what it was. I mean, I was about to go on and it was annoying me. She was like a bee at a picnic. I was like, get the fuck out of here. I'm trying to focus for the show.
Yeah. You did her a big favor because one of the things when you start is you don't even know what you don't know.
That's true. Yes. Yeah.
And you're nervous. And I remember when I first started a headliner, I was working this club in Houston, which you probably remember. There were 2 competing clubs in Houston, the Laugh Spot and the Laugh Stop. They just switched one letter. So I can't tell you which one I was at.
Oh, no.
There was some sort of beef between the owners. And they were
Laugh Stop. I'll be the spot now, not the stop.
Yeah. So I'm walking into the club, and this guy runs up to me, and he goes, hey, my name is Ray. I'm going to be the host for this weekend, but I usually feature.
Oh, God.
And I said, okay. And by the way, the only laugh he got all weekend was at the end of his set when he said he had a CD for sale. People were like, a CD of eating it? Yeah. So, but he goes, I'm the host, but I usually feature. I said, all right. So I go into the green room, and this guy jumps up and says, hey, my name's Mike. I'm featuring this weekend, but I usually headline. And I said, okay. I said, well, my name's Joe, but I'm usually the king of Spain. And they went, what? And I said, who cares what you're usually like?
What you usually do, right? Yeah.
We just go and have our fun, And it was one of those things where the MC, I've already explained what his situation was. He would bomb, and then the second he walk off stage, he's like, so next time you're in town, can you feature? And I was like, hey, what's that thing over there? I got to go look at. So, and the middle act was a local middle act whose sole purpose was to try and bury me so that he could come back as a headliner. And earlier when we mentioned those late shows, this was toward the end of when Saturday used to have a midnight show. Do you remember there was a third show?
Yeah.
On Saturday?
God, I remember there was a dinner show, a 9:00
like
show,
and then prime time, and then
yes. Oh my God.
And these people, and those 2 guys were practically having nervous breakdowns on stage. And I went up, and I was skilled enough at the time to know how to go off book and get them going. So I think after that kind of put the stop to who was talking about where they should be on the show. But I had seen that before where I can't remember who it was, but I was doing some show where it was a 3-comic show. Everybody was doing about the same time. There was a new guy and an older experienced guy. And the new guy came in and he's like, I know I'm booked to open, but I think I should close for but. And the older guy just kind of looked at him and went, okay, I'll go on before you. And the new guy puffed his chest up. And as soon as I was like, something's happening here. And of course the old dog went up and just, there was nothing left for the, I mean, you know, this story ends. He went up and the room was like, wow. And then the new guy went up and people were like, can we get our coats? Like they were done. So yeah, there's always,
it was so,
a moment of humility.
It's so funny when you say that, because I booked a festival, John, I think you remember, for 24/7 Comedy. I booked a festival out in Vegas. We had 8,000 people at this thing. Caliendo, Tiffany Haddish. Nobody wanted to follow Jackie Martling. Nobody.
Yeah.
You can't follow Martling.
Nobody. You can't. It just doesn't matter. There's a pecking
Martling,
order
no.
in comedy. You can't follow that.
Jackie the joke man, he was a technician and he was a machine. He spit out jokes and you could not top him. In my entire career, I only told him one joke that he'd never heard. And it was like a bright spot for me, you know, that I was able to tell Jackie the joke. And he took it and he wrote it down. Actually, there was a night at Rascals one night when Jay Leno came in, and it was at the height of Bob Nelson's popularity. Nelson was a genius. I used to go out of my way. I would go out to Long Island on nights I wasn't working to watch him work. And in fact, I don't know, most people don't remember this. He was in a group called the Identical Triplets. Him, Eddie Murphy, and Rob Bartlett, who did all the voices for
Imus, right?
Imus, right?
Yeah.
So Leno comes into the show and into Rascals, and he just started guest hosting the Tonight Show, and it's Bob's show. So he comes in and he goes, "Hey, Bob, you know, yeah, you mind if I do a few minutes?" And he goes, "Hey, man, you know, this is my show. They're here to see me. It's a different kind of a vibe, and I don't really want." And he goes, "Oh, okay, no problem." So he goes upstairs and he's having dinner, and the owner of the club, Mark Magnuson, is chatting with him, and he goes, "Oh, you want to do a spot?" And he goes, "Ah, well, you know, Leno told me, Bob told me I can't go on." And he goes, "What? This is my club. If I say you're going." So anyway, he says, "You're going to do a guest spot." He goes, "Okay." He goes up and he does 50 minutes, 50 minutes, and he gets a standing ovation. And he walks past Nelson and he goes, "Go get him, Tiger." I mean, it's a complete dick move, but I mean, I couldn't help laughing at it. It was a total douchebag move, but I still couldn't help but go, you know?
Had you ever had something similar like that happen to you?
What, where someone came in and asked to do a spot?
Yeah.
Chris Tucker did that to you, didn't he?
Who?
Chris Tucker did that to you.
No, you know what happened with Chris Tucker? Did you ever work the Comedy Store in LA, Joe?
I did a few spots out there years ago when I was visiting.
Okay, so the original room was tag team, and the way it worked was you were on stage, you had to get the intro for the comic that was coming after you, and when you were done with your 20 minutes, everybody got 20 minutes, you do a nice introduction for the next comic. He goes up, and at the 20-minute mark, he keeps on going. 25, 30, 35, 40. And then they're flashing him and going crazy. And he's like, "All right, I got to go. Who up next? Who that? Who coming on?" After I gave him my intro. "Who that? John, oh, that dude. Okay, with that white boy. That's it." And he just totally destroys my intro.
Yeah.
Before I get to the stage, I look at him. I go, "What, did you watch break?" And he goes, "Man, fuck you." And he's muttering, "White boy, this motherfucker." I go, I got to the stage. I go, "Dude, you're talking to the wrong white boy." I said, "I'll come back and I'll kick your skinny black ass all around the club." I said, I don't know what you're used to dealing with. And the guy was like, "Whoa, and it was back and forth for a couple minutes, and everybody was like, "Whoa, what's going on here?" And I finally, shifted gears, went into the set. And when I got off the stage, we were eyeball to eyeball a couple of times. And then once we literally turned the corner and bumped into each other. And that's when I went, "Listen, dude, we got to work here together. And what happened. All right, let's clean slate and move forward." And I got to say, he was cool about it. He went, "All right, man, that's cool." And we were on good terms ever since then. But yeah, that was the one time that I remember, like he really stepped past the boundaries.
Yeah, it's a weird insecurity thing some guys have.
Yes. Yes, he's allegedly on the list too, by the way.
The list of
The Epstein list.
Oh, geez.
Yes.
I thought the Diddy list, the Epstein. We got a lot of lists.
Too many lists.
Epstein, yeah, his name
too many
keeps
lists
coming up regularly.
I'm on Angie's list in case anybody needs any household work done.
Joe, what do you think about that Puff Daddy list, though, in the trial and everything? Because John's been taking what is that, inner city press?
Yeah.
There's been some pretty. Listen, I don't know how much of it is true, how much is being flowed out as entertainment and education, and how much is legit. I tend to believe there's a real dark element in Hollywood behind the scenes in show business that is running things. And I think, to your credit, Joe, and what you're doing is you guys, and this is not to kiss your ass, I mean this, you guys are the antidote, in my opinion, to what's going on right now. As far as I know, Gutfeld is stand-up funny, in my opinion. And you guys are giving him all the ammo and he's the gun. And you're hitting the bullseye every night. I watch, I tune in. If I don't tune in, somebody sends it to me.
Oh yeah.
Did you see what they said? Did you see this thing they did? And I mean,
who's all of a sudden a Joe DeVito fan? When I was telling him how great he was before, I was blowing up. Come on.
Listen, I'm opening up for him this Friday. Oh, wait a minute. I'm sorry, Joe. Don't go to Staten Island because I'm working Friday night out at Tilly's Table in Putnam County.
Which I've heard is a very good room.
It's a great gig, dude. Actually, it's a really good. If you want,
usually when the name of the venue has a furniture in the title, it's not.
Yes, right.
But this is the exception.
Yeah, come on down to Frankie's Futon.
No, but they're over the target, John. I mean, and the smart thing Gutfeld is doing is he's got guys like Jim Florentine who come on, who he's a legendary comic in New York. I love the guy. I mean, he's got all of these good New York staples. Joe, I mean, you've been a staple in the stand-up scene in New York forever. He's doing it the right way. He's doing it with smart, good New York comics.
Yes, right. Good writers. I mean, the guys like Kimmel, guys like Colbert, guys like Fallon, in my opinion, they lost their way. They lost the advantage and they lost their way. They meander through any quasi attack pathetic attack that they can come up with. It's old, tired nonsense. When I watch what you guys are putting up, even though the content may be in the lanes, the form is fresh and it's funny and it's engaging. And even though Gutfeld has that real sharp edge to him, he's also got the little smirky smile. It's like, okay, we're having some fun here. It's not. It doesn't have. It doesn't feel malicious. Like when I watch Colbert, whatever the fuck. I want to punch him in the face, dude. He really annoys the shit out of me.
It's a shame because he's a very talented guy, and I had seen him in previous incarnations do some really funny stuff.
Yes, agreed. Yes, and then they got hijacked with their anger.
It's they can't control themselves, and I've seen that lack of control with friends of mine. I was out for dinner with a friend of mine, and she said, and she knows that I work for Fox News, and she knows me. She's known me, and she's a friend of mine. She was a stand-up fan and who I worked with and all that stuff. And she kept complaining, and her complaint was, why do Trump voters, they're sore winners, they keep bringing it up. And then she brought it up again, and I said, this is the third time you're bringing it up. Like, I'm just trying to have a nice dinner with you. If it bothers you so much, why? But they can't seem to control themselves. But Phil, what you said about the Epstein list and all that stuff, I think it shows. I'll give you the example of somebody like Axl Rose. Okay. When Axl Rose was a singer for a band and he was poor, he was still mentally ill and an asshole, but nobody cared. So nobody indulged him. Do you know what I'm saying? But once he got famous and rich, that his assholeness was able to flower into its full development. So, it's what they say about money and poverty. How good times and hard times are the same in that they don't change you. They reveal you. And I think what you get is a lot of these people get into show business because they're needy in a way, but they also have an axe to grind. And I think what happens is, as they get more and more wealth and power, asserting the power is what turns them on. I mean, if the joke I have about Diddy is that, look, I don't care if you were a fan or you weren't. That's just too much baby oil. It's too much. You could be a pervert with a quarter of them out of baby oil. But I think it goes to show that sense of excess that On a lower level, I tell newer comics, I wish you luck. I'll help you whatever way I can. I'll share whatever I've learned. But the first thing you should know is that being on stage will never fill whatever hole is in your heart. You got to find another way, because that's how you end up like Kurt Cobain. That's how you end up like all these other people where they got all the fame. Someone like Rich Jenney, what a tragedy. He was a genius comic, but
Greg Giraldo too. In our,
Greg Giraldo, like they couldn't
generation,
control that. So I think that's people, they say depression is anger brought internalized. You have these other people where they really get off on humiliating and behaving in this gross transgressive way. And what is the grossest most transgressive way? It's to turn that towards children and people you exploit sexually. It's the worst thing you can do to humiliate and break a person. And I think that is just, unfortunately, that's what happens where these kinds of sociopaths are in this business, where there are times I've been jealous of sociopaths, of you see the person who's always pushing and nagging to get on shows at the lower level.
Alan
But it works sometimes because they're relentless, and I look at them and I'm like, man, I wish I had the balls that person does. So yeah, I think that's what happens, is that
sometimes determination trumps talent. I used to see guys when I first started working the comic strip back in the day, and I went to I was hanging out for like a year and I wasn't getting spots. And I finally went to Richie Tinkin one night, and I said, he was the owner at the time. And I said, hey, Richie, I've been here a year. I pitch in, do whatever I can. And I was hoping maybe you could give me some more spots. And he said everything except the one thing I thought he was going to say. You're right. He goes, I see you here all the time, and I'm going to start taking care of you. So that was great for about a month and a half, 2 months, and then back into the old ways. And I said, Richie, what happened? Did something, I fell off the cliff again. What's going on? He goes, John, I'm sorry. He goes, you know what it is? It's just the guys that push and come in and they're in my face. That's the ones I remember. And then I put them down on the schedule. And I just said, well, that's not me. It'll never be me. And I walked out of the comic strip that night. And that's when to my advantage, that's when all of the quote unquote bridge and tunnel clubs just began to pop up like mushrooms everywhere. And I was like, whoa. And I started earning a living. But the same thing, it's like all these guys. And here's the irony. I went back 5-7 years later. I stopped past there for something. And the same 3 guys that were pushing for spots were at the podium looking for their spots.
Yeah.
I was like, oh my God, that was such the right call.
Isn't that amazing? I was talking to a comic I started with, and we were laughing about how the comics and look, everybody stinks when you start, just about everyone. But there's some people, they just, it's like someone who's tone deaf. You'll never be able to get a good song out of them. But we were laughing, and my friend said, what makes them get up night after night to get punched in the dick over and over again? And some of them, you think, I've been on shows with those guys where they're crazy people, but the one night they say something and somebody laughs, you're like, oh, now you just inspired him.
Dude, I say that to him all the time. The worst thing is for a bad comic to have a good night.
Good set, right?
Because they will feed on it like a vulture on a carcass for years. Years. Did you ever hear the classic story about Buffalo Bob?
No.
Okay, Buffalo Bob.
I like it already.
Buffalo Bob was this act who used to come into Pips and bomb every night. Every night. And George Schultz, who was the original owner, started Pips in like 1962, I think it was. Yeah. Would constantly tell him, you're not ready, you're not right, you're not this, you're not that. One Saturday night, he had a whole audience of special needs helmet knockers. And his act got lost in the city. And who shows up? Buffalo Bob. And he had no choice but to put him on, and he killed.
Yeah.
And that was the worst thing. He was in front of all these special needs kids. Yeah. He didn't even know that they didn't get it. They were just so happy to see someone up there talking to them. George said he ran off the stage and never even got paid.
Yeah, he didn't need it.
He didn't need it. He did. Well, he didn't get paid money, but that lit the right. Exactly. They come back. That was the best set. Yeah. Every once in a while, right? Yeah.
Every dog, as they say.
Even a blind squirrel gets a nut once in a while.
Some of those guys, though, I mean, one of those guys that I loved. How about the funny guys like Geechee guy who never make it? Who never really make it to the point they deserve, or guys like Bob Zaney who has paved the way for every other comic and never gotten his day in the sun, really.
He has with comics. Comics recognize how great Zany is. Great, he's old school, man. He is like Milton Berle.
Cigar.
He's like Milton Berle and Don Rickles all in one, right? Yeah. He's just he's a total old pro.
Yep.
The thing is, like, even in the group of people I ran with when I started, I wasn't the funniest in that group.
Who were they?
None of them are around. None of them are around still.
They didn't keep doing it.
They didn't keep doing it. It's that first 2 years. Most people, I always tell people, the comedy pyramid has a very wide base because most people drop out in the first 2 years because it's just too much of a commitment. You have to be a sort of a glutton for punishment.
Right. You have to do it beyond reason.
Because you're not getting any positive thing out of it. You have to be able to look that far ahead, which is why I never fault anyone who quits. There's some people who quit who were funny, and I felt bad because I would have liked to have seen them continue, but I never fault anybody. There are people who continued where I would wish they had quit. I would have wished they'd stopped. But you see, when I started, in 2001, it was kind of pre-internet. There was no YouTube or anything like that. So it was a very low time for comedy. Like stand-up comedy, it was gross. You're right. It was lame.
That was a trough in 2001. It definitely hit a low point. Yeah, very hard.
So none of us were thinking. We weren't thinking, I'm going to do this and become famous. We weren't even thinking, I'm going to do this and get work. We were doing it because we weren't. We were just thought. I guess the thought process was, I would like to figure this out and get competent. But my point is, back then you could go to the open mics and you would see legitimately mentally ill people. And, and they were great.
It was
sad. Were legendary. There were ones where you would go nudge somebody at the bar like so and so's on stage. Let's see what happens, because I would much rather see that than someone pandering, thinking they're going to get a TV spot.
Meltdowns were the best.
Oh, they were the best.
Some meltdowns. Oh my God!
Because every now and then they would say something, and you think, I don't know how they got there, but that was very interesting. At least I remember there was one comic who he was so bad, but you always remember one joke, and his joke, he said, if a livery service takes you somewhere, shouldn't a delivery service take you home?
Oh, that's funny.
And I thought,
that's funny. Okay,
not bad.
Yeah, that's good.
I did a show one night, this little place on 8th Avenue. I get there. There's 2 people in the audience and 10 comics. And I'm watching comic after comic go up, bombing. And the woman who was running the show nudges me because I'm supposed to close this nightmare. And she nudges me and she goes, "You're next." And I started laughing. I was like, yeah, no shit. There's no one else could be. But a comic before me goes up. This was right after the big tsunami went through Southeast Asia. It was in the news. So he goes up and he goes, everyone's talking about the tsunami, and everyone keeps saying, what kind of a God would allow this? What kind of a God would kill so many innocent people? What kind of a God would create a killer wave? And he paused and he goes, Poseidon? And I'm in back screaming. I'm laughing so hard. And I'm like, no one here. Like, what a great joke.
Yeah.
But I thought, and I don't know who that guy was, but he had his moment. He showed that he could make that magic chemical reaction.
Yes. And that magic, it happens anywhere. John, you remember the old Playboy, what was it? The Palms had a Playboy comedy club in it. And I went to see Greg Proops, who, in my opinion, is one of the most brilliant comedians out there. But you don't book Greg Proops in the Playboy Comedy Club in the Palms. That's just not the audience for him. I was in the back of the room laughing so hard at the end of the show. Greg Proops said, "Thank God you were here." Yeah. Because I was the only person who got it. So, I mean, there are brilliant comics working that just the audience, the wrong place, wrong time.
Yeah. I used to be a huge Andy Kindler fan. I would always go see Andy.
Oh, I love it.
Yeah.
Brilliant.
And Andy, sometimes I would turn to people around me and say, what are you not getting? But I remember watching him one night, and the room was split into essentially thirds, where people like me, tears,
Yeah.
people who laughed in and out, and people who just did not know what he was doing. And what fascinated me was you would see those three groups represented at the same table, and I think they're friends. So strange that they would have such different sensibilities. But Andy a couple times made me laugh extra hard because a bit wouldn't get over and he wouldn't let it go. He would just keep hammering, completely hunched over, delivering it, over delivering it, talking about how he's hunched over deliver. Like I would be back losing my mind, and I wanted to shake people like, don't understand what's going on here.
That was
some
Jenny.
people voted for Kamala Harris. So I mean,
Yeah,
really,
yeah.
That's how Jenny worked. Me and Jenny were roommates. I don't know if you knew that.
Oh no, I didn't know that. Oh
yeah,
wow.
Yeah, we moved to LA together, and we got out there. It was funny. We land. Well, he got out ahead of me. We were both working on the road, so he went out. He found an apartment. I flew out. I saw it. I liked it. He went back out, gave the deposit. I went back out, and it was like back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. So he called me up the day he got the place, and he goes, "Remember, he used to do this thing with his hair all the time, this little twitch." And he used to go, he said, "Maloney, I'm out here in our new apartment. It's amazing. Sun is shining, palm trees. It's beautiful." I said, "Okay, I'll be out there next week." I drive out next week. I put the deposit down. I get the keys. I get the code to get into the garage. And as I'm pulling into the garage, I'm going, "Wow, I'm in LA. We're in Hollywood. We have our own apartment. I wonder what this is going to be like." And as I pull into my parking spot, I scare up a junkie tying off about to shoot a hot shot of heroin. And he jumped over the hood of the car and ran across. And I was like, "Oh, okay. We're not in Kansas anymore."
Yeah.
But one night when we were out that's how he worked his bits. And it was to watch initially was painful, but the end result was amazing. But we were standing there one night on audition night, and audition night back in the day, you would easily get 15, 20 Island of Misfit Toys coming in to get on.
Yeah.
So the regulars would stand around. And I remember one night there was a guy up there, like you said, Hurley, eating his own dick, just dying. And in the middle of this, of crickets and tumbleweeds, he throws out a gem. I mean, a pearl, a perfectly crafted joke. And the whole audience responded, and even the comics. And as soon as the laughter died down, some comic, I don't remember who it was, went, "I heard it first."
Yeah.
Joe DeVito, we've been on an hour. I don't want to keep you too long. I just want to ask you one last question before we wrap things up. What's the temperature over there at the show with Gutfeld in regard to what's happening and what's going on in the political landscape? Because you guys are kicking ass, and there's no one even close, dude. And it's not because I'm saying it. The ratings reflect that.
Yeah.
And when I go out and speak to people, this is a renaissance. This feels like a renaissance to me. And you guys are at the tip of the spear.
It's pretty cool because we have our own lane, which is always good. And it's a lane that's getting recognized and doing well. I noticed that when I heard when the show first launched, I figured it would do well because Greg's got a proven track record.
He's great.
And it seemed like the time was right. 4 years ago, we're talking about. Did I think it would be this big? No. I think that might also just be mostly because I'm not able to think that big. I just don't know how these things work, that was even a possibility. I thought, we'll do our silly little show and we'll have a good time. And
let's see what happens, right? It's showbiz.
Yeah. It was very interesting. I remember coming into work the day after Trump got reelected. And I thought, what's it going to be? Are there going to be protests outside the building? Because sometimes that happens. And I remember coming in, and it wasn't a triumphant sense. It was a sense of relief, but now's when the real work starts.
Right. Yes.
So,
yes. Good point. Yeah. Good point.
Yeah. We don't really get over our skis too much. And I think it's because it's a nightly show. So I learned that too. You can't get too high. You can't get too low. It's just like stand-up in that regard. It's
just like stand-up. It's a selfish lover, very selfish lover. Get ready.
It is, and you kill one night and you got to go prove yourself again 24 hours later. So
right, you got to start all over again.
Yeah. So I think it is interesting to see what the next phase of the show is going to be for us. I did know we were onto something when the show launched. People said they ignored it. And then the response was, it's terrible and nobody's watching it. And then it was, well, it's terrible, but there aren't really people watching it. So they kept having to move the goalposts. And now it's at the point like, look, I don't say you have to like us. That's your opinion. But you can't deny that there are 3 million people watching each night. That's just numbers. That's just math. So you can have, you're entitled to your opinion. You can think we're the worst ever. It doesn't affect me. So it's kind of like, I don't know if you've ever had an argument with somebody, and when they have nothing left to say, they'll say something like, well, I've never heard of you. It's like, well, that doesn't affect reality. Like, I guess I don't exist then. If you, some random schmuck, has never heard of me, you're a speck of dust. I'm a slightly larger speck of dust. It's all relative. So I'm curious to see what happens now. It's a little different now that we are not so much the underdog, but we're still pushing back against the legacy media. We still have plenty of people to fight and make fun of. Now, I've had 4 years of, there were days I'd come into work and say, all I did today was write jokes about the president of the United States shitting his pants. I can't believe this is a real job that I have. And
yeah, it's great, dude. And, Bill Cosby once said, I don't know the secret to success. This was brilliant, but I know the secret to failure. And that's trying to please everyone. Like you said, you have your lane, and 3 million views is double or maybe even triple or more at this point than what legacy media is getting combined. I mean, look at Rogan, and Rogan is, and even Maher is turning around, and guys like Russell Brand, who was the tip of this spear many, many years ago, and have taken more than their fair share of the hard hits because of it. And even on some small level, us, and we as comedians, we were told, people who had our perspective, and I'm not a political animal, but I'm also not going to stand by and let you tell me I'm wrong for what I think and believe in, especially when it seems that there's a lot of other people that think and feel the way I do. It's just not going to happen.
What was cool about the show, John, is they have guys like Joe, they have guys like Tyrus. I mean, who's a totally different, he's cut from a totally different cloth, totally different background. And then they have guys like Russell Brand. When I saw Russell Brand come on the show and do the show, I was blown away. I mean, that's just showing the reach and showing that you guys are really open to everything and that you guys are listening to everything, because Russell Brand wouldn't be on that show unless he was saying and doing what he did the last couple of years.
They're different. The one distinction is they're only different in form. Their content is exactly the same.
Right.
Tyrus, Russell Brand, even now Rogan, and you guys, the form is slightly different. The goal is comedy, but the content is basically the same. It's common sense understanding. Right. Common sense, understanding everyday life. Like let's look at this from a very common sense perspective with, if you're that awake, a little bit of spirituality sprinkled in for a good measure. Because in my opinion, the other quote unquote side is not just asleep at the wheel. They're in a fucking coma and they're driving.
They don't get it.
They don't get it. They tell, and that's them projecting onto us saying, well, you don't get it. Well, they can say, well, you're doing the same. I disagree.
No, they don't get it. And I'll tell you why. When I would hear criticisms of our show, people would say things, again, another obnoxious, clueless. They would look at the lineups. These are the people who go onto the Gutfeld's Facebook page and hate the show. And I think, do you have anything better to do? There are a lot of things I don't like. I'm not on their fan pages commenting. I have a life to lead, but they'll say things. They'll look at the lineup and they'll say, who? I've never heard of any of these people. But they don't, like, our show is not about getting some baloney celebrity on to promote a movie in a canned conversation. So no matter who you are, whether you're me or you're Tyrus or you're Kat Timpf or you're Emily Compagno or you're Donald Trump, when you're sitting in that chair, you're just another one of the 4 people sitting around talking and having a good time. So I think that's where you see the authenticity. And I think because people like us were so there was no brass ring for us to grab. So we had to be authentic. And you look at the left now saying, it's like they're saying, we need to get in on this authenticity thing. Let's find our Joe Rogan. No. If you were authentic, you would already have that person. In fact,
he would emerge.
His name was
fiercely
Joe
would
Rogan a
emerge.
couple of years
Yeah.
ago. So to
Right,
me,
yeah.
I say, let them keep being delusional like that. Let them keep not getting it, because that's what's going to force them. I would love it if the United States had two political parties that I would, if it was a tough choice, because I liked what both of them were offering.
But when one of them's making stupid taco jokes, I mean, I don't even understand it. What the hell is that even about?
Choose your fighter.
Yeah, the taco
What the hell
thing.
is that?
It's supposed to be Trump always chickening out. And the media, it doesn't work anymore, Phil, because they'll say Republicans are freaking out over taco. No one even knows what it is. And we know that you're lying to us. The mere fact that Jay Tapper is flogging this book and they're all supposed to be like, Biden's White House really pulled one over. Like, we've been talking about this since the jump. For 4 years, we were like, this man is clearly incapacitated.
Yeah.
In a way, it reminds me of a story of one of these teachers having sex with the students out of Florida. Surprise!
I'm listening. Go ahead. Yes. I'm still listening.
Yeah. And she was a special ed teacher, and in high school.
No. So, well, once you go special, you don't go
video,
back.
Joe?
Oh, really? So the thing the woman was saying was, she's like, look, it wasn't me. He tricked me into it. And I started, but my thing that made me laugh was, I think the only thing worse than having an affair with a special ed student is saying you were outwitted into an affair with a special ed student. So is this what they're saying? Yeah, this is what they're saying, like, oh, well, this senile man pulled one over on us.
Yeah, right.
Nice try, guys. And I think that's where people are saying, yeah, we're not going to play that game anymore.
Joe, I let her have it. She was crying for more.
Don't do the voice.
She was begging for it, Joe.
But imagine the husband. The husband's like, with one of her students. The husband's like, a high school student. Was he the star quarterback? And like, well, he was wearing a helmet.
Hey. All right, he got Joe DeVito, ladies and gentlemen. Joe DeVito. Good job, Joe.
Oh,
this
Joe.
Weekend, what's the gig again? Max out on
Max's Escos on Staten Island. Please go to the website, because no one on this podcast knows how many shows there are, but it's at least one.
And we can also do look at joedevito.com, correct?
Yep. And lots of gigs coming in to be updated. So yeah, hit me up, folks.
Let's head out with a little bit of Joe DeVito's Dry Bar special. And Joe, this was great. Thanks for giving us your time. And we will speak to you very soon.
Single guy. I'm single and I just turned 50, which means I'm ready to cut a deal. Maybe you have a nut job sister-in-law you're trying to shove off on someone. I'll take a look. Whenever I say that, men laugh and women go, what about Carol? Every woman has a specific nut job friend. They immediately think of a single guy. Carol's due for release in a few weeks. What's the range on her ankle monitor?
Joe DeVito, everybody. Joe DeVito. All right, Joe. Good job. All right.
Thanks, guys.
All right. We'll see you soon.
Thanks, Joe.